What's going on, everyone? It's Mr. West. I hope you're all well. So welcome to another camera stroke video test, and this time it's for the brand new iPhone XR. Now before I start, you may think to yourself, why bother when the XR shares so much of the camera DNA with the XS and XS Max? Well, why not? I just want to see exactly what bang for buck you can get at its starting price of £750. So we start off in 720p at 30 frames per second from the front facing camera. It's a 7 megapixel camera and it's fist focus, and just like its bigger brothers, it has what Apple calls cinematic electronic image stabilization. It also records in stereo sounds. If you've got headphones on, you should be able to get some spatial awareness of my surroundings. On 720p, you're not going to do too much of this. Not very many people are going to use this mode, but it is useful if you want to save from using up too much of the starting point of 64 gigabytes of internal storage. Okay, so moving up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now you be the judge, but you should be able to pick up a little bit more detail in this mode. And just so you know, the stabilization is employed right throughout all of the resolution modes, apart from 4K at 60 frames per second from the main rear camera, which then defaults back to optical image stabilization. One thing I did like about the recording from the iPhone XS Max was that it's a really wide sound field. It's got really rich recording as well, so it's really crisp, and you do get a good sense of kind of low end as well. So the microphones are very, very good. There was one small problem, and that was with high areas of wind, whereby the noise cancellation would have a bit of a wobble and it would end up sounding a little bit gargly. So you let me know what you think of the audio recording. So we're now in the highest resolution available from the front facing camera, and as far as I'm aware, this is currently the only phone available which does 1080p at 60 frames per second from its front facing camera. Now you may notice there is a drop in exposure. That is par for the course. The higher the frame rate goes, the exposure does go down as well, so it does look a lot darker when I'm walking through these areas here. Now you can increase the exposure just by pushing on the screen and using the exposure control to increase the brightness, which I've just done now. And I can see as well that the stabilization is doing a really good job as well behind me. Now there is an option which has been pushed out in the latest update, which allows you to drop the frame rate down to 24 frames per second to allow for better low light video. But as far as I'm aware, that only works on the rear main camera, because that is the only one of these two cameras which is able to shoot at 24 frames per second. So let me know what you think of the video recording quality from the front facing camera. This is the last now of the modes available, and we're going to switch now to the rear cameras. I will show you what that's all about. Okay, so starting with the lowest resolution available from the rear camera, and that is 720p at 30 frames per second. Now, this does suffer from the lens flare issue, just like the iPhone XS and XS Max, although to my eyes is not as pronounced as it is with the iPhone XS Max, which I tested quite recently. And you can see, I'm not sure if you can see that, you can just see the little green dots where the car headlights there, just blasting through the camera back onto the main lens. And once again, in this mode you do get the wide stereo sound recording and Apple's cinematic image stabilization. So you let me know what you think. Again, this is the lowest possible mode available, and you might want to use this to save on some storage. The lowest iPhone XR has 64 gigabytes of internal storage, and that can get chewed up quite quickly with high quality video. Okay, so we're now at 1080p at 30 frames per second. And once again, you get that crazy lens flare. I quite like it, but sometimes it can ruin your photos, especially if you're taking still images. It's very, very destructive. So you have to be careful with your framing. So you see now I've opened up the exposure right to its maximum, so you are seeing some grain in the top of the image there. So we'll just put that back to normal. So that's 1080p at 30 frames per second. Okay, so 1080p at 60 frames per second now, so you should see the benefit of the smoother movement with double the frames being captured. And just like the front facing camera, you do get a slightly noticeable drop in exposure, obviously with more frames being captured in this mode. So we've got some subtle change in exposure there with the car headlights. So we'll just see with a little gallop how it copes in low light with a bit more speed. And looking at that, the stabilization just doesn't seem to be phased at all, which is great. So looking down the street here, so I think the video does a great job in low light considering the smaller sensor size. This is currently my pick of probably one of the best video devices you can get on the market right now. So that's 1080p at 60 frames per second. Okay, so this is now 4K at 24 frames per second. This is a slightly more jittery frame rate, especially if you come from maybe 60 frames per second. It's more of a cinematic quality. And do we get the lens flare? Yeah, it's not as bad as, like I said, as the iPhone XS Max. It's certainly there, but certainly not as bad. And you can see the automatic exposure and smart HDR doing its thing there. And we don't get any change in exposure, just pointing right at the very, very dark sky there. It's quite a clear night, but it's not picking out anything from the sky. And that is pretty colour accurate as well. That's more or less what I'm seeing, which is cool. Slightly darker over the edges of the stone here, but nonetheless a really good job, doing a good job of picking out that vandalism graffiti there, which is cool. And before we switch to 4K at 30 FPS, we can pick up the fairy lights on this cottage over to our right here as well, which is nice. Okay, so the last but one camera mode, which is 4K at 30 frames per second. Once again, revisiting this camera setup on the slightly cheaper iPhone XR, which lets car pass. Considering the comparatively small size of the sensor we've got to play with, the video is excellent. It's very smooth, the exposure is good as well, so I'm very impressed. And for this cheaper price point of £749 or £750, it represents a really good value still image and video recording device as well, so it's very, very good. Okay, so last of the camera modes available, and this is 4K at 60 frames per second. I will note this is a little bit darker, as I said before. Higher frame rate equals slightly lower exposure, but we are going into a lighter area now. So in this mode we lose the cinematic electronic image stabilization, and this now moves to optical image stabilization. Now we can increase the exposure, as I showed earlier. So this allows more light into the sensor. Now even without the electronic image stabilization or cinematic stabilization, it's still great quality video, even though it's slightly darker. It still does a great job. And the good thing is, with the iPhone, it is literally unlimited video recording up to however much storage you have available, which is really awesome. A lot of phones only allow you around 5 minutes of recording time with 4K 60 to prevent them from overheating, but the iPhone, No such trouble whatsoever. This just keeps on recording and really doesn't break a sweat. I've never had any problems with overheating or the phone getting hot. So it just goes to show you just how powerful that A12 Bionic chip really is. It's very, very impressive. Just looking at the local pub there. Again, if we just increase the exposure and brightness, let's just do zoom. We'll try the stabilization with a slightly zoomed in so you can see a little bit more wobble from the optical image stabilization, but still a great job. So just approaching this house over to the center of the image here. They've got some crazy neon lighting going on in their extension there, which looks really good. The color is very accurate once again. What I'm seeing with my eyes is pretty much what the camera is picking up. So again, brilliant in this low light situation. It's managing to pick that up without any issues whatsoever. Really impressed. And only that street light causing the glare through the camera there. So great job, and does look really cool at the same time. Doing a brilliant job with exposure on the cottage there. So that's the end of the iPhone XR low light video test. You let me know what you think. I really can't see any discernible differences between this and the iPhone XS Max, but you be the judge. It's very difficult to tell when you're actually recording the video as opposed to actually when you watch it back. So you let me know what you think of the video and drop me a comment down below, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. So still to come with the iPhone XR will be a daylight video test, testing all modes from the video camera, as well as a virtual point of view tour of the camera UI. And also coming soon will be the Nokia 7.1. Really looking forward to testing that out. Affordable mid-range phone from one of the most iconic names in the smartphone business. So I hope you've enjoyed this low light video tour for the iPhone XR. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you guys later.